What if the most influential revolutionary in modern history didn't carry a weapon, didn't lead a nation, and never set foot on a battlefield? What if the person who shaped the world we live in today, its wealth, its poverty, its inflation, its political battles, was a quiet intellectual who spent most of his time writing, pacing, and staring out of windows? This is the story of an economist who changed everything. An economist whose ideas were so powerful they pulled entire nations back from the brink of collapse, but whose theories also sparked decades of controversy, misinterpretation, and unintended consequences. An economist whose name you think you know, but whose true impact is far deeper, stranger, and far more dramatic than the textbooks ever reveal. So today we follow the journey of a man whose ideas reached into parliaments, war rooms, central banks, and even your wallet, and shaped the fate of global economies for more than a century. And the mystery we explore is simple. How can a single idea, just words on paper, shift the entire direction of human civilization? The world before his ideas. Before we get to the economist himself, we must understand the world he entered. A world that was rigid, predictable, and dangerously fragile. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the global financial system rested on a single pillar. The gold standard, a system that seemed logical, reliable, and unbreakable. Every currency was tied to gold. Every nation obeyed the same rules. Every bank and business operated within strict constraints. But beneath the surface, a crisis was brewing. The Industrial Revolution had created new economic realities, massive factories, booming cities, global trade routes. But the old monetary system was still stuck in the past. As populations grew and economies expanded, the gold supply did not. This meant slow economic growth, repeated recessions, crippling debt cycles, government paralysis. Every downturn took years to recover from, because the unspoken rule of the age was simple. The economy must fix itself. Governments must never intervene. This was the world before our mysterious economist stepped in. A world where suffering was considered necessary, recessions were natural, and unemployment was inevitable. But then came a crisis so catastrophic that old systems collapsed, and the world became desperate for a new kind of thinker. A young intellectual trying to understand chaos. The economist of our story, John Maynard Keynes, was born into privilege but stepped into chaos. Unlike most economists of his time, Keynes wasn't obsessed with abstract theories. He was obsessed with humans, their fears, behaviors, and the psychology behind financial decisions. He asked questions no one else dared to ask. Why do people panic in markets? Why do businesses stop investing during downturns? Why do governments stay passive even as millions suffer? While other economists treated humans like predictable machines, Keynes treated them like emotional, irrational, unpredictable beings. This single shift, from mechanical economics to human economics, would change everything. But the defining moment came when he witnessed something few economists ever see firsthand. A crisis unlike anything before the Great Depression. It was 1929. The global economy had shattered. Factories stood silent. Banks collapsed overnight. Unemployment spread like a shadow. Millions lost their jobs, homes, savings, their futures. Economists insisted the crash would fix itself. Politicians refused to spend money. Central banks tightened instead of loosening. The world watched helplessly as the global economic engine froze. But Keynes saw something they didn't. To him, the economy wasn't broken. It was simply stuck, like a machine waiting for a jump start. And so, he introduced a radical idea. A dangerous idea. An idea that defied every economic belief of the time. During recessions, the government must spend money, even money it doesn't have. This meant building roads, hiring workers, funding public projects, injecting money into the economy. Not after the recession ended, but during the crash itself. It was financial heresy, a direct attack on centuries of economic doctrine. But Keynes didn't stop there. He proposed one of the most controversial theories in modern economics. People don't save rationally. They save emotionally. And too much saving, during a crisis, could destroy an economy. He argued, when people panic, they save too much. When businesses panic, they stop investing. When nations panic, everything freezes. Government spending wasn't dangerous. It was the only force powerful enough to restart the system. The world was stunned. But as the Great Depression worsened, leaders had no choice. They turned toward Keynes. And in doing so, they forever changed the role of government in economic life. World War II and the fight for a new global system. Keynes didn't just influence domestic policy. He reshaped the entire global financial order. When World War II destroyed Europe, global trade collapsed. Currencies became unstable. Nations were drowning in debt. At that moment, the world faced a terrifying question. How do you rebuild an economy not of one country, but of an entire planet? In 1944, 44 nations gathered at Bretton Woods to design the new global financial system. And at the heart of it stood Keynes. He proposed a new world reserve currency, stronger international financial institutions, cooperative global trade rules, systems to prevent catastrophic depressions. Almost everything he designed, from the IMF to the World Bank, still runs the world economy today. But the negotiations were brutal. Political interests clashed. National pride interfered. And as a British economist facing the emerging American superpower, Keynes couldn't win every battle. What emerged was a compromise. The US dollar became the global anchor. Nations adopted managed exchange rates. International institutions enforced global stability. Keynes's vision wasn't fully realized, but it was enough to prevent another global depression. The world economy was saved, but not without consequences. When Keynesian economics met reality. After World War II, Keynesian economics spread worldwide. Governments began managing demand, increasing spending, creating welfare programs, building infrastructure, intervening in recessions. And it worked. For decades, the global economy boomed. The middle class grew. Living standards rose. Innovation accelerated. But success created its own problems. By the 1970s, governments overused Keynes's ideas, spending too much, borrowing too often, and stimulating even when economies weren't in crisis. This led to surging inflation, crippling deficits, currency instability, the collapse of the Bretton Woods system. Critics blamed Keynes. They said his ideas created governments addicted to spending, unable to stop. But the truth was more complex. Keynes had always warned that his ideas were tools, not permanent strategies. They were meant for crisis, not everyday politics. But few listened. The battle between two economic worlds. After Keynes's ideas were questioned, a new school rose. Neoliberal economics, led by thinkers like Milton Friedman. This era pushed free markets, deregulation, reduced government involvement, privatization, tight monetary control. For decades, the world swung in the opposite direction, until neoliberalism produced its own crises. The 1987 crash, the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the 2008 global meltdown. Each time, governments fell back on the very Keynesian solutions they had once rejected. Bailouts, stimulus packages, quantitative easing, public infrastructure spending. Keynes's theories returned, again and again, because when markets collapse, governments must act. His ideas survive not because they are perfect, but because they are necessary. The shocking data of today. Keynes's fingerprints are everywhere in today's world. In 2008, governments spent $3 trillion in stimulus. In 2020, they spent $10 trillion. Interest rates reached their lowest levels in 5,000 years. Global debt hit $300 trillion. Inflation surged to 40-year highs. We live in a world Keynes predicted. A world where psychology drives markets. A world where panic can collapse entire economies overnight. A world where government intervention is not optional, it is inevitable. But we also live in the shadow of the one thing Keynes feared most: the misuse of his ideas. Governments today often stimulate even when there is no crisis. They borrow far beyond their means. They treat Keynesian economics not as a last resort, but as a habit. And the result is a global financial system stretched to its limits. Keynes changed history. But history is now twisting his ideas in ways he never intended. 3 takeaways. 1. Economics is not about numbers, it's about people. Keynes taught us that fear, hope, and confidence drive the economy more than statistics ever will. 2. Government intervention is a tool, not a lifestyle. Used correctly, it prevents depressions. Used excessively, it creates instability. 3. No economic system is perfect. Capitalism, Keynesianism, neoliberalism, all rise and fall in cycles. What matters is balance, not ideology. We are entering an era of rising debt, rising inflation, global tensions, fragile supply chains, and unpredictable market psychology. The world is beginning to resemble the very conditions Keynes witnessed before the Great Depression. And history shows that ignoring economic reality, or misusing economic tools, leads to collapse. If you want to understand how today's financial storms formed, why markets behave so strangely, and what history warns us will happen next, then subscribe to World Financial Mysteries, where we uncover the hidden forces shaping our world, one story at a time.